Hello, STEM girlies! Welcome back to Computer SHeience, the podcast that connects ambitious and driven people just like you to the trailblazing women of STEM. I'm extremely excited to welcome our next guest of the year, Alexis Li. Currently studying computer science at Stanford University, Alexis has been an ISEF Finalist, Regeneron STS Top 40 Finalist, Coca-Cola Scholarship winner, Diamond Challenge finalist, and achieved the USACO Gold Division. So she's here to share her incredible journey, experiences, and insights with us today. And whether you're exploring a career in STEM or looking for inspiration, this episode is packed with wisdom you won't want to miss. Let's dive right in. So Alexis, thank you so much for being here. Could you start by sharing with our viewers a little bit about yourself, your work, and what you're specifically studying in college this year?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Alexis once again. I'm originally from Gilbert, Arizona. My previous work was really related to the brain. So the first one was Alzheimer's early detection and classification. And then the second one was really using brain functional MRIs for neuropsychiatric disorder classification using graph neural networks. So I am interested in majoring in computer science, doing work related to computational biology, and really exploring how AI can help improve patient outcomes and help doctors in the future.
Yeah, that is so cool. How did your journey in computer science and doing medical research begin? Was there a moment when you realized, yes, this is the field I want to pursue?
For computer science in general, I don't think there was necessarily one eureka moment for it, but my interest was definitely built over time. So when I was really small, I remember I really wanted to make video games. So I started learning JavaScript so I can learn how to code text-based games. They were really small and they honestly weren't very large scale or very in detail, but I feel like that really piqued my interest in, I can do things that I'm interested in using computer science and programming. And as I got older, I wanted to learn more about algorithms and structures of how these different things worked and how to make things faster. So this is when I started looking into USACO problems and guides to try to learn more about them, and I started doing this in middle school. So that's when I started getting interested into the more technical side of computer science and programming. And in between this, I guess, where my interest in biology really started was learning about the field of medicine and how much good it could do for other people. I knew I didn't just want to go into the medical field as a pre-med. I wanted to be able to help using my interest in computer science and technology as well. And when I got to high school, I knew I wanted to work with artificial intelligence, specifically because of its potential in the fields of biology, to help patients with these automated classification techniques, and also help doctors with this kind of support. And the reason why I wanted to do biology, specifically related to the medical side, was because of my family members, my grandma, and also my friends in high school who had these conditions and really needed this kind of support but weren't necessarily getting it as efficiently as they could for the healthcare system. And I think this applies anywhere. When you're going to have doctor shortages, as we saw in the pandemic, they're really going to need all the support that they can get. And this is where I think AI can come in and really help them and try to provide them support.
Yeah, that is amazing. The work you do is truly incredible. So building on this, what qualities do you think are essential for achieving success in STEM fields?
I think there's two main qualities for succeeding in the STEM field. The first is really just perseverance. It's really not always easy to keep moving forward in a field, and you will have a lot of struggles in between, because just getting into something that you've never learned about before can be really difficult. I remember when I first started learning about graph neural networks, I really had no concept of what they even were. So I had to start off by watching a 60 video lecture about graph neural networks from a previous Stanford course, and that was really difficult. I didn't really know what I was doing at the beginning, and it was a bit of a struggle. But I remember I just kept moving forward. I just kept reading more papers, trying to write more code, trying to do more tests, and eventually I started to come together, learn more about the code from different GitHubs that I was looking at new ideas from different papers and going, wow, I could try to find a new way to reinvent this or integrate it into my work. So this perseverance part is really important because science is really like a marathon, not like a sprint. So you're going to have to keep this up for a few months at least to up to a few years if you really want to do good research. But I think it's important to know that you have a goal at the end of the day, and even if you end up not succeeding in what you want to do, there can be something valuable you can learn from that failure as well. And I think the second really important thing to being in the STEM fields is curiosity, being always open to these new ideas, because of course we can always use like models and of the past and understanding of data from the past, but it's only by having these new ideas and like these new integrations that we can really like move forward and make these fields like more efficient and everything. So it's really important to have that kind of curiosity and always be open to new ideas, even if you haven't been exposed to them before.
Definitely, perseverance and curiosity are two vital aspects of achieving success in STEM, whether that's science, computer science, medical, anything. So thank you for mentioning that. And with such a busy life that you lead, you've also done so many things in high school and now with college. How do you balance and manage your time between university, work, extracurriculars, and your personal and social life?
Yeah. So I think the importance of balance is just using whatever time you have in between. Like when you first wake up in the morning, that little time you have before you go to class, you have to be doing like some work, and like even when you're doing class, when you have a bit of downtime, doing work can really help keep you on schedule and make sure that you're doing like little bits over the day. Even if you're not sitting down to just like do 90 minutes of work, you've already done some of it throughout the day. So that can really help with improving your work. And balancing that with your personal social life is also what I like to do, at least, is when I like to schedule things to do with like friends over the weekends, which encourages me and motivates me to do work throughout the week. And this I found is like really good motivation for myself, at least. I feel I need to get all my tasks done for the week and then go out, have fun, and play with my friends. But I think it's important to have like this motivation and understand that you need to use whatever time you have, or else you're going to get down to doing your work and be like, oh my gosh, I only have like 2 hours to do like all these assignments and I haven't done any of it. So I think that's a really important part.
For sure. And I love that you mentioned using downtime and that time in the mornings. I'm a big morning person, so I definitely advocate for spending a large chunk of your time, not even a large, more like an hour in the morning, and just getting your biggest task of the day done then, because you're so much more fresh in the morning, your brain is at its peak, and so it's really easy to knock down your biggest task for the day. So thanks for highlighting that. And then high school years overall can just be incredibly formative. What are some of the leadership roles or internships or opportunities that you leveraged during high school that helped shape who you are today, that you think maybe not a lot of other people leverage?
I think the two most important internships I really had throughout high school was my 2 research internships. The first was with Dr. Ko-Wei Chun of the Alzheimer's Banner Institute, where I got more knowledge on how to like start my research and like computer science related to like Alzheimer's classification. He helped provide me some of like the biological knowledge of what I needed to know for that. And I also think that working with Dr. Yang at Emory University was also incredibly helpful. I think that he helped really introduce me to like the world of academia, conferences, presentations, all the like how to like edit your papers and everything. So I think that they both provided really great support for me when I was doing my research. Of course, I had to be self-sufficient in both of these research projects, had to come up with the ideas, do the coding, the implementation, but it was helpful to have a mentor to be able to like ask questions, ask them to recommend you papers to read in the future about your projects, and then be able to also ask them to help like edit papers. I think that was really, really helpful for me in understanding more about how to come into research, which can be quite scary at times. I think another really important leadership role I had was as president of Yes We Serve. We provide tutoring regularly for children in partnership with the Salvation Army, but I also had specific classes that I wanted to teach, and I did teach about other topics, such as I held research AI camps over the summer to get students into doing research competitions, for example, or just trying to find mentors like locally in the region in Arizona. And I also did like public speaking classes for people, because I think that's another really important thing, being able to learn how to present and talk to other people and convince them. And that's why I'd say my last opportunity that I thought really helped shape who I am today was speech and debate. I think it definitely made me a better speaker to other people, which is more important in the field of academia than you would initially think, but being able to concisely communicate your ideas to other people and also be confident when you're doing it is incredibly important.
Yes, for sure. Communication, whether you're pitching a research idea or talking to other people, is vital in every aspect of life. So that is definitely a big thing. And you briefly mentioned about doing research. I know you've done a lot of research in biotechnology and especially with Alzheimer's disease. So you said in an interview that your inspiration came from your grandma, and this was done in honor of her. And you even ended up going to ISEF for the research. So could you talk a little bit about your research journey, how you got started, maybe some obstacles that came in your way, and what you've learned in general throughout this whole rigorous process?
Yeah, so my research journey with the Alzheimer's project really started in 2020 with the rise of COVID. I know during the pandemic time, my grandmother's condition started getting worse and worse. It would start with like small things. She wouldn't be able to remember me, for example, on a phone call once or twice, but then it started like escalating to things like she wouldn't remember my father, and then she started having a lot of issues with under control. And I really saw that during this time that none of us really saw or realized that she had Alzheimer's until it was really too late to do anything about her condition, which is why I wanted to explore like early detection and classification to help people like her, because Alzheimer's manifests 20 years before obvious symptoms will show in a patient. So it's really important to have other factors that you can look at for this early detection before they take the test and realize, oh, they have Alzheimer's, but it's already getting to a later stage. So for the research journey, at first, this was my first time doing anything AI related with like technology. So I knew I needed to find a mentor, which is why I reached out to the Alzheimer's Banner Institute, because I knew that they would have more knowledge on what I should do, how I should move forward with the biological aspect, because I knew at the beginning that I wanted to work with like multimodal data, like MRIs, for example, and like French and psychiatric data, because all of these are important factors to include when classifying a patient with Alzheimer's or not. So I knew I wanted to do that, and I went to them to understand more about like the biological aspect and what I should do. Throughout the research journey, it was an interesting time learning about different models and like what I could do with them, because what I was doing was I was using a multi-ensemble approach with a voting classifier. So it was taking a lot of different models that were taking in different modality data inputs, such as the psychiatric data and the MRIs, and trying to combine those results together in order to get a more comprehensive understanding of Alzheimer's. I think the struggle for me at the beginning was trying to learn about all these different models and what kind of data I could apply them to. And I remember that I was a little frustrated with the results at the beginning because they weren't as high as I wanted them to be. But I think this is where it's important to learn from your failures even when you don't think you achieved all that you wanted to, because I ended up using those results in explaining how biases in the data, for example, were the cause for some of like the inaccuracies, and adjusting for them could help the model become more like comprehensive and generalized. So this is what I brought to ISEF in the end, and I was able to talk about these results. So I think this is a good example of even when you don't think you completely succeed, you're able to learn something and bring it and show it to other people.
Definitely. And what you mentioned about having struggles in your research and then getting back up and finding a mentor, and realizing that maybe you don't know everything, and finding a mentor before you start is vital. And that's so essential for whenever you're starting research for the first time. And I know you've got into ISEF, that is great, and you've also been a Regeneron STS Top 40 finalist. So for somebody who has not done any of these things, what do you think is the difference between the two as science fair or research contests? And could you explain a little bit about both of them, and then what are the specific differences between the two in terms of maybe the research that you do or the way you present these two things?
Great question. So as you already said, both of these are science fair and research contests, but a really big difference between the two of them is that ISEF is available for anybody in high school, freshman through senior year. You basically apply with a project, you have to make a poster board for it, and then what you do is that when you get to like your local or state fair competition after qualifying from regionals or your school competition, is they will do interviews with you about your research project specifically. They'll ask you questions, and then they'll identify like which projects they think have like the most potential in the future or have done the best like academic work in the current. Regeneron STS is specifically targeted towards seniors, so you can only apply during your senior year for this award, and they're more focused on your potential as a scientist overall, not just for your specific research project. So when you come into ISEF, they'll only ask you questions really about your project. But when you come into STS, they want to know about your overall science knowledge. So they'll bring in a very diverse panel of judges to ask you anything from like chemistry to biology to physics to even like ethical questions about what we should do in the future about climate change. So the project component is still important. They'll definitely still ask you questions and interviews about that, but it's also more about, we think that you as a scientist, you have like a broad range of knowledge, you have good problem solving skills, and we're interested in your potential as a scientist in the future. That's what they're really concerned about in the end.
Ah, okay. That is really cool. I didn't know that STS asked about all different things. So that is amazing. I just want to mention that when you faced the Alzheimer's thing with your grandma, you didn't just sit around and you decided to make an impact. You were like, I'm going to change this so other people don't have to go through the same thing that you did. So that is really, truly amazing. And what type of advice did you give to other people who maybe do face issues in their life or are struggling? How would you tell them to get back up? Because with any amount of success or any amount of failures, you can always get back up. So what would be the in general advice that you'd give to people for taking an issue that you have, but having the courage to solve that issue?
Yeah, it can definitely be a little bit scary in the beginning when you're not quite sure what to do. But I would say that once you've identified an issue that's really important in your life, it's important to go out into the world. Like, the internet is giving us great access to research from all around the world. So it's important to first look at what other people are doing first. Doing your literature reviews especially is really important for this part. And in terms of like getting back up and like really trying to make a difference, once you've done your literature reviews, it's about finding the support from your community to make it a reality. For everyone, this might not mean necessarily getting a research mentor or like cold emailing a professor from a different state, but maybe you'll find like friends and family who can support you in these endeavors. I know that, for example, if you want to get into like robotics or like engineering, if your parents can support you, help you build maybe your own studio at your house where you can make your different parts or put your components together, that's always really helpful. So I would think it's really about finding support from your larger community in order to help you with these things, and also staying curious and research online to be able to understand what's currently happening. And then when you're doing your own implementation, it's about always like learning from your failures. As we said earlier, that's the only way that you'll be able to like tune your models or tune your projects to make them successful in the future.
Amazing. And next, I know that you've won the Coca-Cola scholarship and gotten first place at the Diamond Challenge. So could you talk a little bit about what both of these experiences entailed and what they meant to you?
So Coca-Cola is more so proving that you have the capability to be a future leader and somebody who will contribute back into society. So Coca-Cola has a few different application rounds. The first one is inputting more general information about your volunteer hours, your activities. The semifinalist round is getting more into you as a person. So this is when they start asking you about essays, for example, and really details about your activities. And then the final part is an interview. I've heard this varies from person to person, but at least for my interview, they talked a lot about my work and what this meant for like the communities I was trying to impact through like nonprofits and through my research. So the Coca-Cola weekend was really exciting. It was really getting to meet a lot of people who had different goals in their life, but we all shared the common goal of like wanting to help other people. Like I met cancer advocates, for example, people who did different kinds of research in like the fields of biology or like finance and economics. So it's really interesting to be able to talk to all of them and understand for like this small concentration of people who could possibly be leaders in the future, what does that look like for them? And then the second one for Diamond Challenge is really an entrepreneurship competition. So you have to pitch an idea that you have to like the judges and convince them that it's like worthy of funding in the future. So what we did for this project, I was working with a team at the time, is that we were creating a 3D prosthetic arm that was more cost efficient than other prosthetics on the market and also had a new innovative wrist joint mechanism. So we were able to prove to the judges that we have this kind of innovative technology. It's 10 times less the cost of other prosthetics you currently see on the market, which makes it really useful for people in like third world countries, for example, who might not have access to the current prosthetics that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially if they're high tech. So Diamond Challenge was more of proving that this product is both economically viable and also useful for people in the current world.
Amazing. And this is a recurring question among our viewers. So everyone has big dreams, and everybody wants to do all these cool things, participate in all these amazing activities and contests, but resisting the temptation to spend away full blocks of times on our phones is a struggle for many. What are some tips you would give to your younger self for prioritizing time and getting work done?
I really like this question. I used to have a little bit of a problem with this, like trying to scroll through like Instagram Reels or like TikTok. It can be difficult because all these things are made for instant gratification to make you happy through the use of an algorithm, which you, at the end of the day, are probably not going to beat through self-control alone. So I think that the most important thing is that if you struggle with just being on your phone a lot of the time, identify the apps that are causing you these problems. And my best advice to you would actually just be like deleting them. So for example, if you're on Instagram a lot, doing Instagram Reels or like texting people a lot, delete Instagram on your phone and then install it on a device that you're not going to be using as often. Or if you really need to use it on your web browser, for example. That's the best way to just get rid of the distraction and not have to think about it. If you really truly can't do that for an app for one reason or another, like you actually use it for like work or for school, a good thing to do is, instead of trying to chase that instant gratification, set up specific days and blocks of time where you're specifically just doing work. And then after, you can like schedule things for your friends, for example, or just schedule an event that you really want to do or something that, a hobby that you really want to do for fun. And once you've scheduled that up and know that later in the day you're going to have something exciting to do, then you can focus on your work right now and not focus on that instant gratification. Because a lot of the times I feel like people go into mindless scrolling knowing that it's not going to be good for them. They'll probably be doing it all day, but they can't resist the temptation. So A, just get rid of the temptation. And B, create a stronger motivation than the temptation to overcome it.
That is amazing. Those are such practical, key tips that everybody can take away. So that is great that you mentioned that. And I also saw that you've achieved USACO Gold, and that is so amazing. So what advice would you give to an aspiring girl just starting to dip her feet into this contest? Maybe not even for USACO, but in general, getting into the computer science field. What advice would you give to somebody?
There's a lot of online support for computer programming and for USACO as well. So I think that the first part of this is, if you're just getting into computer programming in general, look at a lot of like YouTube guides, for example. A really good resource that I used when I was young was W3 Schools. And this was really helping with like the basic syntaxes of like different languages and the different components of them, how to use the if-then statement if you don't know that yet. It's a really good resource for that, and there's a lot of YouTube tutorials if you want to look into it as well. For USACO specifically, there's the USACO guides that they will publish with the different topic areas. They'll give you a ton of problems that you should do from like easy, medium to hard. And this will be on a variety of different platforms, so you get a lot of practice with these, and I think they are super helpful. The second would be to just do practice problems from previous years. Some of the older years, their levels are a little bit harder than newer years, but I think that all of that is like good practice for identifying what kinds of questions they could ask you. For example, when you're just starting out in bronze, they'll ask a lot more brute force questions, so you can get a little more away with not knowing specific algorithms. But once you start getting into like the silver and gold territory, that's where you need to start like learning algorithms specifically, and that's where the guides are super helpful. They'll just identify them for you and you can really study those. There's a lot of people online, especially who are doing YouTube videos, who will just walk you through the entire problem. I find that these people are really useful because they tell you their thought process, which is the most important part about USACO, that planning process before you start implementing your code. So there's lots of possibilities, and I would actually apply this for any kind of programming in the future. When you're looking at something even like AI, I recently got into trying to learn about AI agents, for example, and I've never done AI agents before. But when I was looking at YouTube and looking at AI agents with reinforcement learning, there's still a ton of YouTube guides for that. Even though it's much more of a niche, like higher level computer programming topic, there's still so many guides, there's still so much support for it. So I really think that you should really utilize your access to the internet and not just try to learn all these things from scratch by yourself.
For sure. That is so great. I love that you talked about specific things that you can use when you're starting to prepare for these contests. So thank you for that. And our last question of the podcast is, with any amount of success comes challenges and failures. So could you share a time where you faced a significant obstacle in your journey and how you overcame that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to talk about my second research project, which involved graph neural networks and neuropsychiatric disorders. When I first was starting to work with it, I was testing out a lot of different models on my data sets to see how they would work out. The models were initially super inaccurate, 60% accuracy all the time, no matter what modifications I was making to them. I started getting pretty frustrated with this because at the time I had already been working on the project for a month or two, and I was like, I still can't find a model that can even break the 70% accuracy mark. What am I going to do? This project is never going to work. But despite all this self-doubt and frustration that I had, I decided to just keep moving forward and see what kind of enhancements I could make, or even if the model didn't work, at least I would be able to point out something maybe interesting to talk about to other academics or to my mentor as well. But as I continued to read papers, which is why I think reading papers is so important, I started gaining new ideas from other people, not just within my field of graph neural networks specifically, but also in other fields, just generally about things like data augmentations or using autoencoders, for example. And that's when I realized I could pull techniques from these different kinds of papers or these different kinds of fields. For example, data augmentation, I used Mixup, and that wasn't specifically for graph neural networks and was actually geared more towards 1D data instead of 2D functional MRI data. But I still tried to use it and decided that I wanted to integrate it because it was really interesting for data augmentation and creating new, more generalized models through this data. So I think that's a really important part. When you have a failure, you can be frustrated in the moment, it can be really challenging, but it's important to always keep following a process of looking online, looking at more papers for research, and then being able to evaluate where you can move forward. I think that's really important.
Definitely, that is amazing. And that does bring us to the end of this podcast. A huge thank you to you, Alexis, for being so open and authentic with us today. Your stories, tips, and anecdotes were absolutely inspiring, and it was such a privilege to have you on Computer SHeience. To all our listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with your friends, and leave us a review. It helps us connect more ambitious girls to amazing STEM role models. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and chasing those dreams. See you soon on Computer SHeience.